Do you want me to check if it's live on Facebook?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another round of Behind the Workshop. My name is Jason Tamborini. I'm the Artistic Director of Prologue Theater. This Behind the Workshop series is part of our Forward a New Work series. Tonight, I am joined by Rex Daugherty. Wow, I'm going to say it again. Oh, man, every time. Rex Daugherty.
There you go. There's Irish last names. You look at them and you're like, what do I do with all these consonants?
I don't know why that just slipped me up. So, Rex, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with workshops as we kind of talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's so great to be chatting with you. And I just came off of a workshop last week, so thoughts are fresh on my mind. So I am the artistic director of theater programming at Solus Nua, which means new light in Irish. We are a contemporary Irish arts organization based in Washington, D.C. We do all kinds of stuff from theater to film, music, literature, dance. We've done fashion in the past. We've done sort of pop-up flash mob performances. And a lot of site-specific work as well over our years. We're now in our 16th year, I've been in that role as producer there for 5 years, and I've made the DC area my home for the last, what is it, like 13, 14 years, since 2007. And over that course of time, I've been an actor, a director, a producer in other companies. I've been a choreographer, songwriter, dialect coach. DC is such a great city for the charcuterie board of getting involved, and so I've been a lot of roles, and I've been a lot of roles in a workshop as well. I've been on both sides of the table, as we say, as I've been a producer, a director, an actor, a writer. So yeah, and it's always, workshops are so different because you always have to serve the piece, but they are just so vital to the success of a project. And that's I think the biggest thing I've taken from them over time is like, how do you really give yourself space to blow up a play in a workshop? When there's no, the workshop is about trying something. The production is about like producing something, and all right, now we have to do. But in a workshop, you get to just try, and you get to see what might be before you have to start making those decisions of what it is.
I like that idea of this, but putting it that it's the trial before the doing of the.
Yeah, it's all about the what, not the how, right? Like it's that's what's exciting about it. That's what I love about being in development workshops is like just how open it can be, and just like let's say yes to everything and figure out what to say no to later. And let those producers tell us no on the other side of it.
Figure it out later, right?
Yeah. But I mean, but this past year, this past summer, I was doing a workshop for some new digital plays, and I just reached out to Peter Marks at the Washington Post, and I said, hey, why don't you attend all of this workshop rehearsal period? And he told me he had never really been invited into a full rehearsal process. And throughout the process, we're just having so many conversations about what's going on, and we've had this conversation publicly as well. So I'm not telling stories out of school here, but Peter told me, I never realized how important a workshop is to the life of a play, and I was just my jaw dropped, and I was like, Peter, how do we get critics into this process? How do we get other people to understand why workshops are so vital? It felt like, have we been keeping this secret from everyone? I felt almost bad that, as a theater artist, this wasn't more widely known and more publicized.
Yeah, and that actually, Rex, that's part of the reason behind this conversation tonight, for behind the conversations we've been having throughout forward with our playwrights. The idea that so much happens outside of the 2.5 hours that an audience is sitting watching a play that sometimes they don't know about, and it might be very helpful for them to get a kind of inside look at or anything. And it's not meant to be insider information. It's one of those almost ideas, as I mentioned just before we went live, that idea of like, I don't know if people really want to know about this. Like, it's that idea of, we're not trying to hide it, but do you really find it interesting?
Well, and I think they do. And I think that's a way, people in the theater industry, as you well know, Jason, will joke about when an audience sees a play and the first thing they say to an actor is,
how'd you memorize all those lines?
Exactly. And that's, to an actor, that is such a basic function of what you do. Like, actors want to talk about, well, like, how did I make this believable and honest, and what part of my performance moved you? Did you recognize in your own life? That sort of higher level stuff. But people are so impressed with this, function that we just do.
Yeah.
But part of it is because people don't understand the process. And I've been thinking, especially in the pandemic, of how do we demystify the artistic process? Because it's not like we just reach our hand in the jar and pull out a hit play. So what is it that happens in workshop, in rehearsal, that is the true nuts and bolts of it? So yeah, inviting people into that process is, I think, particularly exciting.
Yeah, we have maybe a thesis in the midst there of the demystification of theater. There you go.
Yeah, and hopefully that leads to more exciting post-show conversations.
Absolutely, yeah. Just because I forgot to mention it earlier, for anyone who's joining us and watching, if you have any questions for myself or Rex, maybe not personally, but in regards to the jobs and about workshops, please feel free to post them. I'm keeping an eye on all the comments, so please feel free to do that. Rex, let's talk a little bit. Tonight we're kind of trying to focus a little bit more on the idea and the role of a producer, which you mentioned you've done. It's kind of falls into the fold of the job of the artistic director, but doesn't always. And then as you get into larger and larger theater organizations and into that kind of realm of commercialized theater, it's its own separate entity, and sometimes there are multiple producers and executive producers and associate producers and all of that kind of thing.
Right.
But
what does that look like?
Speaking specifically of kind of smaller operations, like Prologue, it's a very small operation. Solus Nua is not as small of an operation.
Well, I don't know. I think we're in the ballpark.
What is, generally speaking, the role of a producer, and then what are a producer's duties when it comes into a workshop setting?
Yeah. Well, I'll just speak for myself, because so many, producers have so many great models that they can follow a personality to success, and of like, hey, here's how this person produces in their setting. So what I have found, and this is me as a personality, like, this is me as a middle child, this is me as an extrovert, this is but like, the way I interpret my role in a workshop, and really in any process, and not just a workshop, but my job as a producer is to put the right people in the room together. I'm sort of the party maker. Of like, all right, like, you and you have like a similar color, or like, and this person doesn't. go make something awesome, and let's see what happens. So that is, I don't know, it's exciting. But that's what I thrive on, is like making connections for people, of like, oh, you're fascinated with this, so is this person. Maybe there's something to develop there. And then just when you're fortunate enough to be able to fund that, then you get to see the fruits of that. But but yeah, I think of my specific role, and how I function best as a producer is is just getting to say, like, hey, come play with this person.
I try to, anytime I have to describe what I do, I use the term facilitator. I'm a facilitator. That's what I do. Um, so do you think or do you see duties of a producer being for a workshop different than a typical production
um I think
outside of just like bringing
yeah,
that team together?
right. I think the focus is a little bit different, right? Like, the focus in a workshop, you really, the most successful workshops, I think, really serve the what.
Mm-hmm.
um and I said that earlier, of you don't have to answer the how are we going to do this right now. But the really successful workshops, I think, ask the what question, of like, what is this play? What does it want to be? What is it about? What are the elements that make it interesting? Asking those what questions, um, capital H, I think, are, I don't know, and that's what sort of you can facilitate or wedding coordinate, whatever that is, whatever your role is. That's what I think sends artists on an exciting journey, of let them answer those questions, and let them come up with some of those questions too, but making sure that the whole team is focused on the what. um, and sometimes that's really, it seems, so simple to say, but I've made a habit of any workshop now emailing the whole team before we start, and just say, hey, this development week or this development workshop, however long it is about serving the play, not about the design, not about, of course it's about any question that you might have, but sometimes that we just need to know that that's not the function of this week, and that might be tabled for another discussion.
Yeah.
Like, if an actor is really into a particular, individual moment, and you're like, that is so fascinating, I can't wait to figure that out with you
Mhm.
later. uh,
Yeah.
but the flip side is also true. Like, sometimes what an actor is responding to on that impulse level is actually the connective tissue that we need to talk about as the what. So, like, both are true, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's just because there's no golden grand edict you have to follow. You just have to referee that.
Yeah. There's a lot of uh, intricacies and kind of subtle differences workshop to workshop. And I think some of that does have to deal with what the what outcome is being sought. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think it also deals with, um, I mean, as always, timeline. And while I don't necessarily, as I said earlier, don't necessarily want to talk about it, but like money line, it has to do with that. I mean, like for specifically for forward for this, the outcome of the workshop is meant to really just be a service to the play. Yes, we do a final reading on that, but like it's not about that reading. That reading is not meant to be any sort of production. It's just meant to be a presentation of where the play we've been workshopping for 2 weeks is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also recognize that's not always the case. I mean, there are definitely a lot of plays that get workshopped, and it's a workshop that goes directly into a production, or
Mm-hmm.
it's a workshop several months and or years out from, but the goal of it, the end result, is meant to be some sort of specific product. whether it be a commercial product or whatever that is. But it's some workshops tend to have that goal in sight.
Yeah, and I think if you bring an audience into it, the important thing is just to articulate where it is in the process. Like, what are they looking at? You know, if they're expected to be enjoying a play reading of like a full play that has been produced and you're just doing a reading of it or whatever, they might have false expectations versus like, hey, this is like the first out loud reading in front of an audience that this piece has ever had, and we don't even know how it ends yet, you know. And you're a part of that journey. I think it's just helping an audience understand like, where is this process. Everyone understands baking or like cooking, so like, you know, where in the caramelized onions process are you?
You're making me hungry. We talked about this.
Yes.
Really
but
quick.
I think we should talk about money at some point tonight, because I think it is really interesting.
I think we're going to get there in a second.
Okay, great.
It's hard not to. Before we do continue though, quick shout out to you for your instrument wall from Stan Kang. So hi, Stan, and Stan loves your instruments. Again, anybody who's watching, feel free
Stan
to.
gave me this guitar.
Stan gave that to you. There we go.
Yeah.
Anyone watching, if you have any questions for Rex or I regarding workshops or producing or anything like that, please feel free to post those. The question I kind of want to get into before we start talking about the money side of things,
sure,
and I think this will kind of lead us into the money side of things, is producing a workshop as a nonprofit theater or a not-for-profit thing it's a different thing than being a commercial entity attempting to workshop something before a production. And not always. I guess I'm speaking from my own, albeit relatively limited, personal experience.
But I mean, of course, there are differences. Yeah, of course.
And scale is one of the reasons behind that. But what would you say are the benefits for workshopping something in a nonprofit or a not-for-profit sector rather than the more commercialized kind of side?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess where I would say is they are the same, is that, well, you're trying to find out what lands with the most amount of audiences, right? Like, the audience always knows knows at least as much as you do, not sometimes more. So like, what do you learn from an audience? That is always so valuable. But yeah, I think as far as the nonprofit model, I think, you know, being known as a center of new writing is its own reward, right? Like it makes me, I just recently thought of this, but as far as a parallel, but you know, I think of the great cities throughout history that have become known as like epicenters for great art, you know, like Florence in the Renaissance and New York in the 60s and 70s. And like what they had that was true is like all the artists gathered there, and they were all like sort of figuring out what's new, what's fresh, what works, what doesn't work, and just like slamming ideas against each other. And there was this like concentration of ideas that was just constantly churning out, and then you produce, you know, your Leonardos, you produce your Bob Dylans, you produce you know, who wrote Patti Smith, you know, like these great artists, because of what's in the zeitgeist, right? So, and I think that the companies that the theater companies that have become known as new works have, in a sense, created that model. They've created little cities for themselves. They are the epicenter of this, where people want to gather for new work. So like the Public, and Steppenwolf and Woolly Mammoth are, you know, like I would put them all up there of like, they created this energy, they created a city where people gather for new ideas. So
And you have you have festivals where it's all new works, and those essentially in that
yeah,
period of
exactly. Like
year, it's a whole
Humana Festival, the Contemporary, American Theater Festival, Fringe Festival, like all of that, like energy together, people gather. Fringe is, of course, maybe the best example of that in Edinburgh. But yeah, getting everyone together and like just that also as a producer, if you're the producer sitting on top of that, you then get the bird's eye view of like, oh, what I said earlier of now you get to see who to put in a room together because people have all gathered in one place. So that is, I think of that a lot, and I've been thinking about that metaphor of the cities. How do you do that? And now how do we do that online? But
yeah. Well, and we'll talk a little bit about the online in a couple minutes. So in the comments, we've been asked to expand a little more on the what focus. And I guess a way to kind of do that, but also talk about some of the other stuff we said we were going to talk about, specifically the money, because I think the money falls into the why and the how sometimes, sometimes, especially as a producer, the money answers how we're going to do this. But can you expand a little bit more on this idea of using the workshop to focus on the what,
right?
So that later on, specifically the producer and other administrative group can focus on the how.
Yeah. One of the things that's been really helpful to me recently, it is at the top of a workshop with the whole team sort of setting a compass for what we believe the work is about, which is all of us answering the question, what is this play? And we come up with like buzzwords, theme words, like, this play is about intimacy. This play is about, this play is hopeful. This play is communal, like whatever the buzzwords are. And then wherever people are on the journey, we all know we are pointing to this what. We're pointing to the star of, we've all agreed that the compass points to these buzzwords, and coming up with like a community sort of compass to get there, I think has been really helpful on what that play might be. And it also helps write the play, which is the what. Like the words of the play are the what. The story of the play is the what. We've also had a phrase in recent workshops of don't get it perfect, just get it written. And I think that's a good example of what is a what. The what is like the draft of the play. It's literally, and this is, I will say that this is a lot of what I'm saying is very narrative based. Sometimes the what is like, I don't know, it's the dance that happens here, and we need to.
It's this emotion. It's this.
Yeah, exactly.
Thought.
Yeah, this nonverbal moment, or entire piece. But the what is the actual, like, what would be on the paper, what you might read, what the story is, the real basics. So, what is the architecture of the play? What is the structure? What is the outline? What is every scene? That all goes into that what bucket.
Yeah.
I hope that answers whoever asked that question.
It was Stan.
Stan.
So Stan, we do hope that answered. If you have other questions, please let us know. Again, questions, if anyone has them, please feel free to post the comment. So I'd like to kind of mush over, which is push and
Can
move.
I say this about another benefit about workshops?
Yes.
Is that so many times you get to work with artists that you might not get to in a full production, of like your schedules don't work out, or for whatever many reasons you can't grab someone for a full production. You get to work with more artists than you might normally get to for the, a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And equally important is workshops give you the opportunity to have a long form conversation with an audience about what they might like to see in production.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, like audiences know just as much, if not more than you. We as producers don't know everything. The actors, the designers, the directors don't know it all. Like we are a community in theater, and we have so much to learn from our audiences, and that workshop allows us to have that process.
Yeah, and they also are. I mean, from things that I've seen, is I really love when when an audience member comes up and kind of not keeps me in check, so to speak, but like says something that, and that maybe even explains what they took away from something, that because we were so focused on the what of the project, we were not capable of seeing. It's a little bit of a Plato's cave there. Like we weren't able to see we weren't able to see ourselves. We only could see our shadow.
Yeah.
Being able to have that conversation with audiences as part of the process really helps.
Something I always ask. So we have a play reading series at Solus Nua, and I always ask a few questions after our play readings, and one of them is, would you pay full and we do like the applausometer, so it's not an official survey, but it does give me a good sense, and we've produced a lot of plays out of our play reading series based on like, wow, the audience really responded to this. But I ask, would you see a full production of this and gauge that response? And then I ask, would you pay full price to see a full production of this and gauge that response? And then a third question is, would you insist that a friend pay full price to see this a full production of this? And it's just interesting to see who's really rooting for something in your audience, and that helps you find out who's passionate about it.
Yeah, I totally get that. So another question came in. So the question reads, do you ever end up with a what that is bigger than you can produce when you get to the how? And the side question to that being, or is the key in hiring the right designers who can give you the what within your limits?
Yeah, that's a great question. I directed a workshop of a play at a different theater company, and there was this wild dream sequence that most of the play took place like in an apartment, but there was this huge dream sequence where like a bathroom needed to appear suddenly, and like just the landscape needed to drastically change. And during the workshop, which was like going really well, had a fantastic team, but I was sitting next to the playwright, and when we got to that bathroom scene, and the producer was reading stage directions, and they were like, a bathroom appears, there is like a toilet and stall and XYZ. And I whispered to the playwright, good luck to the director who has to figure that out.
Yeah.
Only to discover that then the company decided to produce the play and hire me to figure it out. So I was like, son of a gun. But the process of that, yeah, exactly. The process of that is just, if you can't, and honestly, it would not have been as satisfying to create a real bathroom and wheel it on stage, and that would have cost $8,000 more. What was interesting about it is asking the questions of, what is the essence of a bathroom? What is the essence of a toilet? And what do we need? What do we actually need to come on stage for this like toilet fever dream? And that was like just really satisfying. And I think it ended up being like a stool and half of a wall that the actor could pretend, this is my stall and this is the stool. So like, you can always find out what, and sometimes the limitations, or sorry, how, and sometimes the limitations are what makes it more exciting. Another great example is I directed the Sarah Rule play, Late, a cowboy song. And
Yeah.
Sarah Rule is kind of known for her like very poetic, wildly ambitious stage directions.
You mean like an
And
elevator that it rains inside?
yes, exactly. And then this stage direction said, a real horse walks across the stage. And then like in parentheticals, it said an abstract approximation will do. Um, but like to me, it was such a like, I love that because A, it's the playwright telling you, be as crazy and ambitious as possible to solve this problem in an artistic way.
So so using that example, do you think that that was something that came up during the workshop process, or possibly even like a preview process, where the playwright was like, "No, a real horse," and somebody looked at this playwright during the workshop and was like, "Okay, but how? Like, is that worth the consideration? Is that, while we understand we're talking about this idea of the workshop being about the what, is it worth talking or considering the how in moments like that, or what do you think?"
I mean, that's our job, right? To consider the house. So yeah, it's worth considering. I mean, with that specific example, like Sarah Rule comes from a poetry background, so she's already writing in metaphor and image, and I think she intentionally keeps it that strong in order to inspire uh wildly ambitious answers to, because I think she knows no production is doing a live horse. But she wants to see how close to the essence of a horse walking across the stage that you can get
Mm-hmm.
in your design, in your how. So, and that's like the joy of it, right? Like that, of finding out, okay, like, I mean, we had crazy answers. We didn't do this, but one of the ideas was, what if we got a mechanical bull and like from one of those event companies, and then after the show we let people ride the mechanical bull. Like that was on the table, and it was such a it was a dumb stupid idea, but like it was like we were bringing reckless creativity to it. And
And as a producer, I have to say is, as long as they sign a waiver, we're okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wasn't producing that one. um, so
Um,
but yeah, it's always the how. And like I think that you know one of my favorite directors is John Tiffany, and he who did Once,
mhm.
and Harry Potter on Broadway. And um he is such a he talks a lot about theater is the medium of the imagination.
Okay.
um and how, if you can capture an audience's imagination, you can do literally anything.
Mhm.
And that to me is so so fantastic, so such a great um, way to operate in our storytelling. It's why I don't love directing realism, because I'm like, film can do this better than us. But like what film can't touch is this sort of spectacle that um, comes out of imagination. That's not always budget driven, but it is creative driven.
Yeah, no, I get that. So let's talk about the other side of the producing job.
Yeah,
Let's talk about money.
do it.
Which is, it's so hard. I mean, look, I don't I don't personally, and I know a lot of other people don't ever necessarily avoid talking about money, but it's also that kind of almost unspoken rule, like, we don't talk about money.
Right.
Um, and it's prevalent throughout all aspects of theater, what people are paid, what things cost, all these kinds of
Hmm.
things. And we're recognizing, and I find I've recognized and realized and had conversations with people that idea has been detrimental to a lot
Yeah.
of things. Like this idea
Yeah.
of like, oh, well, I had to do this rental at this place and it cost X amount of money, and people are like, what? And it's part of the reason that theater as a business is hard to kind of operate in. What are a producer's duties in your experience when it comes to money, to getting funding and finding all those things?
Well, your duty is to make sure what you've said yes to that you can support. And that means saying no to some other things, and sometimes a lot of things. So yeah, your job, your duty, your responsibility is, we've agreed to do this show with this cast with XYZ, whatever the elements are, and understand the elements. Like, is this a show that we can produce? Must it have a working kitchen unit? Like, what are the elements of the show that translate to a budget? And can you do that well? And if not, is there an artistic solution of, like, do you need running water in your kitchen, or is that the play that you should be producing? Someone asked me recently, I noticed Solo Snua doesn't do a whole lot of, like, big kitchen sink drama realisms. Is that a style choice, or is that a budget choice? And I was like, it's kind of both. It's we're not at a budget level where we could build an apartment on stage. It's also artistic in the sense of, like, I don't know if that's the best theater. Like, to me, my mission, not my mission, but Solo Snoo is aesthetic, I think, can thrive, especially as a smaller company, thrives in that, our currency is imagination, and coming up with more answers there. So where I don't know where I was going with that, but I will say, I think the producer's responsibility. But yeah, your responsibility is to serve the piece. And what does it need, and understanding what it needs before you agree to produce it. But on the flip side, maybe not even the flip side, but maybe another angle is, we are so product driven. And I think a challenge, and this is something, like, let me know if you've had success with this. I think I'm still thinking through this, but just to be vulnerable with whoever's watching. One of my challenges is how do you get people excited about process in a funding way? How do you get people really to donate towards process when it's easy to see a product. It's easy to say, oh, wow, the costumes were so fantastic in that show, and an actor that I liked was in it, and XYZ. But how do you get people to believe in the earlier part of, like, let's create a city that is known for making magic? That's harder, and that because it's not as deliverable. It's more about reputation. So what do you think? How do you get people to fund that?
I don't.
Or our audience, anyone watching, how do we get funding to believe in development processes?
And I do think that there are people out there that do believe in the entire process enough, or they believe in the product enough to understand that there is a process that goes into it.
Yeah.
They may not be fully aware of what that process is, but they are willing to stand by the process for them.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I mean by demystifying theater. Like, that's I think a role that we can take on as producers of how do we invite more people into the tasting room of this is how it gets made. And we all know we like theater. We all know we like the end product, but how do we show our how do we like maybe we need to get over that idea of a magician never reveals his secrets, and be like, no, I'm going to show you how the card trick is made.
And there
and
is something to that. There's something to that idea of, and it's super interesting to me, and I don't know if everybody else finds this interesting, but that idea of like, there is something about specifically, and I'm going to use your magician revealing his trick kind of thing as the example. But if a magician tells me that they are going to do this trick and they tell me all of the steps,
it's going to be a good trick.
But I'm still in that, like, I'm still mystified by it. I'm still intrigued and it's just enmeshed in that world right there that this person or this has been created for me.
Yeah, it's such a command of the skill. Like I don't know if you saw Hannah Gadsby's follow-up special. I think it was called Doug.
I have not.
But her follow-up to Nanette, which was such a groundbreaking comedy piece. But in Doug, she spends like the first 10 minutes of the show telling you exactly what the rest of the show will be. And part of it is, she says, and because the show will be so good, you will forget that I told you this until the moment after. And like that was such a like fantastic skill set of like, I'm showing you everything and I will still amaze you. John, one of my favorite authors is John Irving, and he does that a lot. Like he tells you the exactly what the book is in the first paragraph, and then the rest of the book is unpacking that. Like I still remember the opening line of A Prayer for Owen Meany, which is like, even though he was the instrument of my mother's death, Owen Meany is the reason I believe in God. And you're just like, that's a great hook. So anyway, I think how do we hook people more in on the building of the world? And that's something we should be creative about, and that can be one of our duties as producers. Let the artists keep doing the stuff, and our job is to connect the artists and the audiences as well.
There's something you're saying, and I can't put my it's on the tip of my tongue kind of thing, hit my finger on it, but there's something there that is like kind of like nagging at the back of my head. Something you're saying is like hitting something for me, that idea of using, in essence, this idea of demystification of showing our hand to an audience beforehand, before they've seen the final product.
Right.
In an effort to obviously garner funding in some ways, and to have the audiences in our
to garner excitement, right? To garner passion, like to garner investment in all its senses, because like some people's contributions might not be financial, but it might be like who they know, or they like, well, I have a warehouse you can do a play in, come on over to my place, or whatever it is. But like, how do we and the next question is, how do we create the time in our like, oh God, we got to do the next grant writing proposal, and oh God, I got to get schedules out for everyone. How do you create the time to lift your head out of the sand to articulate to these people, to everyone, of like, here's what we're doing, why we're doing it, and here's how you can get involved. I struggle with that. Like just the other day, we had like 2 days ago, I think we had a board meeting where I articulated the vision for this upcoming theater year. The budget's already passed, but like, so like some of this stuff I was like, we kind of know this, don't we already? Like we passed the budget for it. But it was, how often do you get a chance to say to all of your shareholders and stakeholders, here's why I really believe in this. Here's
Mhm.
why I'm excited about this. And that energy is infectious.
Yeah.
And me and Miranda, who's our executive director, we were just talking afterwards of like, oh yeah, we need to like make time to do this from time to
Mhm.
time, because this is the fire that catches. This is the thing that we're all thinking this stuff in between, you know, like in the elevator, in the shower, of whatever it is, when you're in between these moments of go, 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 go. But it actually goes further and is more energizing if you stop for a moment and can organize something to say like, here's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that was sort of two things, but you were smelling that you were smelling the magic trick.
So we've gotten two questions, and I actually kind of want to make sure we respond to these. So Stan's asking, isn't there a huge difference though between funders and audience members?
I feel like we should just send an invite to Stan and he can join this conversation. Stan, like, yes, these are all so great. I want to hear from Stan too. He knows how to do this as well. But sorry, what's the rest of the question?
So that's his question. Isn't there a huge difference between funders and audience? And I'm going to hold on to this question because we also got a question from Namdar.
I know that.
Asking us to talk about donations versus investments in getting funding for a project, and then how that affects proposing a project, which I think is like another whole step in the process, specifically as a producer, but that's also a business side of differentiating what the funding is and how it's coming out.
Can you say it again? What that question was like? What's
Sure. Namdar's asking, can we talk about donations versus investments in getting funding for a project and how they affect proposing a project?
Yeah, so I guess I'm curious what the difference of
Well, I think if I have to guess,
investments is.
If I have to guess, this idea of, and then to me, an investment is based on the promise of a project in somebody's eyes, kind of thing, versus a donation typically stems from product. Like, oh, I'm going to donate when I buy a ticket, or I'm going to donate after the fact.
Yeah, I see. Like maybe the investment is like, I want to see an outcome.
Yes.
And a donation is like, hey, you do good work, I want to make sure you're around.
And Dar just responded and said, yes, the idea of an investor wanting a return and a donor, and giving without a need for.
Right. Well, I mean, in the nonprofit model, no one's really, we're not in the model of show investor of like, well, I get my percentage back, because that's just not that's a commercial model. But I do think people have can have investing mentality, and I think we do have to honor that, of like, if someone is giving to like a specific show, of like, hey, I like this idea for a show, I'm going to give you X number of dollars or resources or whatever. Yeah, I think your job is to make sure that they know how that investment was spent and handled and managed. I think people need, I think you always have to be careful of not making sure the artists always own the show. But there are different ways to get involved, so drawing those lines is helpful. But yeah, just making sure that people just want to know, like, well, what happened with what I gave you this? What happened to it? And that's true in like
in the comments, Christy makes a great point. It is also deals with U.S. tax law, because if you're a nonprofit, there is no profit, and if you are a for-profit, then you're looking at having those investors expecting returns. So most of that.
But also, if your donation is a tax write-off, so whether it's an investment or a donation in a nonprofit, you get something back already.
And it's not just a thank you.
That's right.
Although it is a thank you.
But like, there's more than just that. Of like, if someone is making a financial commitment to your institution, then they are investing in your community, right? And like, I think our role is also as producers is shepherding that, of like, someone has said with their money, with their wallet, I believe in this. And so how do we let them know you are one of us, and we are you? Like how do you broaden that community? How do you make them feel invested, not just feel, but truly are, as part of the ongoing dialogue of what you do in your organization? And I think, especially with millennial and beyond and after, but like, more and more people aren't like going to church, people or like other sort of gathering places, but the arts can fulfill that sort of I don't know, spiritual meaning and sense of community that I think a lot of people got.
Do you think there is a sense in some communities and or age groups and or whatever the depth, wherever you like are clearing these defining lines, that just by being a patron of a specific theater company or of a show, that people are also looking at that as like, well, I'm a patron, I bought a ticket, I am helping them, versus, and like maybe there's a way to figure out how people see that versus this idea of like, let me donate money either on top of a ticket or instead of like, or like outside of a production kind of thing, where that line is.
Yeah, I mean, it's both, like, right? Like, and that goes back to what Stan just said of what's the difference of an audience member and a donor. But it's we always know you have a choice when you fly with Southwest. And we're so thankful that you chose Southwest Airlines, whatever it is. But and that's true in DC, right? There's so many theater companies here. There's so many options that people can be single ticket buyers for. So yeah, people do support with their patronage as well. I think, we producers spout whatever the percentage of ticket sales actually goes towards, only covers, X percent of a production, because we rely on donations as well. And we can often do a better job of articulating that, of like, hey, ticket sales cover this portion of a production, but we need underwriters and sponsors and donors to subsidize more of that.
Oh yeah, and there's so many invisible costs, not even hidden, just invisible costs that and it's something that I've tried to be transparent about, but like, oh, I've got an office, and in my office I have to pay electricity and I need internet.
Yeah.
I just all this other stuff that goes in that people don't go, oh, that makes sense. That's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you get funding for your storage unit and not just your productions?
And it's almost that I jokingly, not joking, I wasn't joking when I said this. I wanted to work with our marketing, the people we have for marketing, to be like, look, I want to just like have pictures up with price tags of like, like pointing at our lights and be like, yeah, electricity costs us this much a month. Do you want to be a donor for that and cover this cost for this many months? And just be super transparent about it. not in an effort to be, I don't have a better way to put this, but not to be a smartass about it, but just to to be sincere and to be open about it. Because if somebody if somebody wasn't to say to me, oh, well, like this is this cost for that thing, and it's every month, and we don't take ticket sales into account when we're covering the cost of Wi-Fi at our office, that kind of thing.
Right.
And that idea of, look, I'm not trying to necessarily only garner ever financial backers or donors based off of a production of a product. And that there's this idea that there's so much more to most theater companies than just the play an audience member comes to see and sits down and watches for a couple hours.
Right. And I think that's the value of really focusing on creating community. I say this aspirationally, I'm not necessarily pointing to like, and here's the great programs that I've done, but like it is something I think of a lot. And like, how do we really get people to like, I will pay for the lights because I like this community. I'm part of this. I'm part of the household. I want the lights on. And that's, that's giving access points, that's giving feedback points, that's listening, and just creating, multiple avenues for people to feel at home and part of your organization. That's one way. I don't know, like there.
Nope, it's the way. It's the only way, Rex. According to Rex, that is the way.
Stan knows. Stan, please leave in the comments how you do it, because ETC, Educational Theater Company, is an amazing organization. I've worked there over the years, and like I feel like Stan is the George Bailey of South Arlington. Like he has created this like wonderful community of families, of friends, of parents, of artists, and he connects them all. And what him and his late wife Elizabeth built together is just such a beautiful organization that I think creates belonging so well. So Stan knows something that we don't know. So I'd love to hear from Stan.
Stan, leave it in the comments, or just email us and let's set up a conversation.
Yeah. Like Jason foolishly chose Rex Daugherty to be on this panel instead of Stan King.
I don't know. I don't have there's no rationale behind it. I've known Rex a little bit longer, I guess. So there you go. Yeah. I know we had some other kind of talking points that we had thrown out to chat about, but also we've been going for an hour now, Rex.
Well, I'm a gabber.
No, that's not a bad thing. I just don't want to take up too much time of yours. I recognize that.
Well, no, you're fine. I think I do think your next, your one of the questions you put that we haven't touched at all is interesting to talk about, which is just, what has changed virtually and like what does that look like going forward? And so maybe just to touch on it briefly, because I'd love to hear from you of like, well, what have you learned and like what's going on? But like to me, I feel like, the industry is going to be shaped by the pandemic for years to come. And like a lot of these lessons will trickle in over time. But maybe the biggest one we're all learning is about access, and just about ease of being everywhere, ease of bringing storytelling to people, rather than you have to come and get babysitting and parking and metro and dinner and all the other things that go into live performance. But I don't know. For me, it's sort of, there's like a dual reality going now of like, even when we're back in normal times, We're already budgeting in how to make really high quality digital productions of that work, so that it can reach people who didn't get to see it, whether that's because in like we're doing a site specific show this summer, and some people won't have a lot of people won't have a vaccine by then, so they might not feel comfortable coming to the show, but you'll be able to see it at home. So there will be like a live element, there will be the streamed element, um, and then like we're all creating digital audiences now, and I think we can't abandon them as soon as we're back. I think a lot of people were like, I can't wait to dump all of this digital programming as soon as we're like got that button of we're back in the building. But particularly for Solus Nua, because we have an Irish cultural mission statement, the Irish diaspora is around the world. So we've really discovered there's a huge benefit to having a strong digital presence, to connect audiences globally. So
Yeah.
that's like fantastic, and something that we've changed forever. And as well as connecting with artists globally is so much easier. We used to think in terms of plane tickets, and now we think in terms of Zoom meetings. And Zoom was here before that, but we needed a pandemic to shake up our model, and now it's just so much easier to. I mean, I think we're like commissioning 5 pieces since the pandemic,
Oh, wow.
and becoming more of a regular commissioner, because it's like, hey, we can work with writers from literally around the world. So we're doing that. I think that's been the 2 big ways we've
Yeah.
changed. What about you all?
I think I mean, and I think from what you're saying, I wholeheartedly agree with, and I think that the theater as an art form has been kind of stuck in it does what it does and it does that well, and I think that this has shaken that up kind of enormously.
Mhm.
Everyone uses the term. We as a company had to pivot. We had to do this other thing that we were not ever anticipating doing, or we're not planning to do, or not prepared to do. And I look, Prologue falls into that.
Right.
We had to quote unquote make a pivot. I don't think our pivot was necessarily as grand as others that I've seen, and I don't think what we chose to do with this time, with this digital only, is very far off from other ideas that we had been throwing around that we really wanted to work into our programming, but didn't know how.
Right.
And this gave us the ability and the opportunity to do that. And this whole the whole idea of Forward being finding ways to workshop new work, but also to work with more artists, to get more artists more work, so to speak. And as you spoke to it, like it does, it's allowed us to broaden our horizons with artists.
Mhm.
It's allowed us
Yeah.
to broaden our audience base. Um, when we sent out the call for the Forward submissions for new plays, I guessed, I was like, we're going to get like 50 submissions. We got over 600.
Yeah.
We got them from 6 or 7 countries around the world. Like it was something that was very
That's great.
jaw dropping to me. And then since we've been producing, having these workshops and doing readings of the play is at the end of 2 weeks. I mean, we've had people all over the country kind of stopping in, whether it's because we were working with an actor based in Chicago or California or New York, and they had some people they knew, or
Yeah.
just some word of mouth stuff. So I mean, it's been really interesting on that side of it. I think something that I've learned that I want to continue to use is this the ease of access, as you mentioned, like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
That yes, it's going to be a problem for a while still, with people not getting vaccines for a while and people maybe not feeling comfortable. So this idea of finding ways to provide as much access for as many people in as many ways is similar to this idea of differentiating instruction when you're teaching something, to find whatever you need to do to get the information out, to get your story across. And I think that this pandemic and this, like, being forced into this digital world has allowed us to do
Yeah.
is to see new ways and to experiment with new ways on how to do these things. And I really do look forward to being able to find different ways to play around with it, and then to fine tune it. I don't want to necessarily give away anything because I've got a couple of ideas up my sleeve, and I'm like, I really want to play with this.
But when you're ready, show us how the card trick is done.
Well, no, yeah, and I think that's part of it. I think I don't know if you've watched it yet. The recording of the New York production of In and of Itself.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I'm such a fan of Frank Oz.
It's on Hulu. I actually could have and should have seen it in New York when I was there doing the Sam French Off-Broadway Festival a couple years back, and it was playing across the street from the Vineyard. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. Didn't see it. And now it's on Hulu. You can watch it.
Yeah, it's on my list.
I watched it the other night, and it's a moment where, he tells you all of it. And then he tells you, he even says, like, at the end, I don't know what's going to happen. And it changes. And like, he tells you all of these things, and yet it is still utterly fascinating. It is, and it's a way to, I mean, that show could be done just digitally, really. I mean, no, you need an audience, but like, there is so much that is still useful in just me sitting in my living room watching. The emotional, I would almost call it work that I went through watching this piece. It was an absolute journey, and I loved every moment of it. Right up until I was crying, and I was like, I don't know why I'm crying.
Well, and that just gets to the heart of what theater does better, right? Like, like if theater doesn't do special effects better, like, and those are shock values. Those are like, well, if I know it's coming, it's not as impressive. But theater does storytelling better, and we are humans as herd animals. We retell stories, and so like there's something about the retelling that it doesn't matter if you know how it ends. The important part is retelling a story, and being a part of that repetition.
There's something to, there's the whole school of thought that theater needs a audience to occur. And I don't disagree with that. I do think that audience needs to be live, but I don't necessarily any longer know if that audience needs to be in person. You guys experimented with a show that was entirely live, but digital, like that. All of those, like, figuring out and playing with, and I know this will bring back this idea of like the what. Like, now essentially everything for the next couple of months, at least at my table, which is not small, is going to be is playing with the what and workshopping ideas of how to produce for all these different audiences and all these different things. And it's, I mean, obviously also have to kind of consider the how, and a lot of the time I'm spending thinking of like the why, but being able to play with the what for the next couple of months is really exciting and absolutely terrifying. So, well, but that's what I'm kind of going with it from this virtual era that we've now kind of
created. And to add another, like, we're getting too dorky with the what and the why is not, no, but like the digital thing has asked us where, like we gathered in person before, how do we gather now? What does it mean to assemble? And for Solo Snua's emoji play, we assembled on WhatsApp. Like all of the audience was on a text chain, and was texting the actors during the show, and that was a gathering place. That is a assembled, concentration of exchange. So I don't know. To me, I was like, well, we were gathered. It was live. But I also think, who is it? Jordan and
615.
yeah, they had a great article that said like, stop asking, is it theater?
Mhm.
Like who like that's not the question. The question is let's just ask, is it good storytelling?
Yeah.
Um, that's what we should be focused on. Of like, I don't, let's not be so rigorous about like defining what is theater.
Mhm.
Uh, it's good to strive to like for what makes it feel like theater, maybe, of like investment and but yeah, I don't know if I'm particularly interested in that question now, which I will admit, early on, I was like, all right, what makes it theater? And now I'm like, what makes it good storytelling? Um,
Yeah. No,
that's
I,
been
I agree. And I
evolution
think,
for me over the last 10 months, I guess.
yeah, I cannot, I won't say that I've been thinking about that for 10 months. I've been thinking about other things, but I think it's a little more from my end of it. I have yet to get to the point of questioning that kind of idea. Um,
Mhm.
but I also never necessarily blindly accept anything. So I don't necessarily worry about that question of like, is it theater?
Right, right.
Um, I guess I just inherently could just consider it like worry about the storytelling aspect. So um, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um I think that's all the questions I have, man.
Great. No, no, great. If anyone watching this at any point, leave your comments about process, and like what is exciting to you about process, and maybe like, what do you want producers to do more of in process. It would be great to hear from just anyone who's catching this at any time in the future.
Yeah, and definitely that's I know I know that people do watch this later on as well. Thank you, Mila, for your time as well. And Stan had sent a signing off a little while ago. He said George Bailey of South Arlington signing off. So you know that's going to stick with him from now on.
I
No,
mean
yeah,
it. I he is.
any you know, I agree with that your statement. Anybody watching, if or anybody that does watch, if you have questions about process, if you have questions about the idea of the producing aspect, the workshop aspect that we can maybe answer at a different time or follow up with, I'm happy to do that as well.
Or learn from.
And we get a chance to
Yeah,
learn from it as well. We get a
yeah.
chance to just open this up to more conversation, which is just never bad. So with that, Rex, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Um,
my pleasure.
I look forward to getting a chance to meet up with you again in person sometime soon.
One of these days.
One of these days. But we'll chat again soon. To everyone who joined us, thank you so very much. To anyone who's going to watch this later, thanks for watching. We have our next workshop reading coming up. It is The Whole Shebang by Jason Odell Williams and directed by Charlotte Cohn. It will be on Friday, February 12th at 8 p.m. You can register for tickets on our website, www.prologuetheater.org. Tickets are free with a suggested donation. So we hope to have you join us. Rex, any plugs for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So coming up next week at Solus Nua, we're having a panel discussion called Voices of Change, Feminist Interventions. And it's meant to be as a follow-up conversation with a few different women-led movements. One that was in Ireland was called Waking the Feminists, which was a response to the very male-dominated, who playwrights and directors jobs going to a disproportionate amount of men. So it's, I think, 5 years after the Waking the Feminist movement. So Leanne Bell, who is one of the thought leaders behind that, is on the panel. And she is joined by Jojo Ruff, who was in DC, she was one of the lead producers on the Women's Voices Theater Festival. And she's joined by Deb Savini and Grace Adumaso, who are just like theater makers. And it's forward thinking and just fantastic theater makers who are going to be discussing that. And sort of like next Thursday, which is February 11th at 4 o'clock. We've been doing things sort of late afternoon sometimes to catch people in Ireland as well, because this will be a transatlantic, across the pond conversation about international trends in women's representation in the theater industry.
Excellent.
You can sign up on our website, which is solusnua.org.
Cool. So for those of you who are interested in that, please consider joining Solus Nua for that next Thursday at 4 p.m. Sounds excellent. Any quick shout outs or anything like that before you go?
Shout out to my wife, who put our kid to sleep during this conversation, and he didn't come busting in, attacking the Zoom call, which he loves to do. So
as much as I
in Fairfax County,
yes,
she's going to be on the front lines of school going back, and she's amazing. And shout out to her, to Lee Daugherty.
Thank you, Lee. We appreciate it. Although, gonna be honest, if your son if it had Zoom bombed us, I would have been okay. I really would.
Oh yeah, here's one thing I'm taking with me in the future is I'm no longer apologizing for being a parent. But
that's an important thing, is that idea of we've now welcomed so much into our personal spaces with all of this. Even as artists, as makers, as whoever we are, that by welcoming all of our work into our personal space, we also have to then allow for that personal space to still be personal.
Yeah, I mean, that's another, like, you could do another hour panel discussion on that, which is actually a really good thought because that's a great COVID related discussion of how is performing in your own home okay and not okay.
I don't necessarily want to be on that panel, but I will definitely watch and I will comment. But again, thank you so much for your time, Rex, and I look forward to chatting again soon. To everyone who joined us, thank you, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.